It's that time of the year. It's the start of the year, right? The start of the year when we all say we're going to get in better shape. We're going to eat less. We're going to fill out more. We're going to give more to the needy. We're going to spend more time with our family and friends. We're going to work less and love more. It's that time of year of resolution, folks. And guess what? Whether it's anything I just said there, or in fact, it's Phonathon resolutions, we're here to talk about what you can do right now to make yourself more successful, whether you're giving, is your fundraising, whatever it might be. In the world of higher education, what do you need to resolve to do so that you will be a rock star? My name is Daryl Praill. I am your host today. Please don't confuse host with expert, because I have two of those. You probably saw them already in the invites. You're going to meet them shortly. But I'm so stoked about today's conversation. A couple reasons. I know, I've got my own, resolutions. I'm trying to lose some weight and get a little better shape. And I'm trying to do my job better too. So together, you and I, we're going to bond as we talk about those Phonathon resolutions you need to do for 2020. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. I did mention to you that I had two experts. I'm really excited about them. Let me bring them up right now. The first one up, Bob Burdensky. Now, of course, most of you, if not every single one of you, know who Bob is. If you don't, go to Google right now, type it in, or just listen to me tell you that Bob is an internationally recognized annual giving and engagement consultant, author, speaker, trainer, case laureate, and has served more than 200 institutions since 1994. I think we did pretty good in getting Bob on here. I mean, it's your bio, man. He has worked with clients all through the U.S. and Canada and Europe and Australia and Asia. He's also the author of 3 Council for the Advancement and Support of Education, so CASE, bestsellers on all things related on the subject of innovations in annual giving. Bob, my friend, thank you so much for giving us some time on your schedule today.
Hi, Daryl. Thanks for having me. And hi to everybody watching out there. My online audiences don't usually have to suffer looking at me on live video, so apologies for that. And a couple of points about VanillaSoft. I want to just make the point, I am not being compensated for being here. I happen to think VanillaSoft is a product that's worth paying attention to, as all of us are trying to sort out sort of where we go forward with the Phonathon. So if you're like me, maybe you thought VanillaSoft was an ice cream parlor, but I'm pleased to be with my VanillaSoft friends. And just want you to know I'm doing this because I think this chat is important. Thanks for the opportunity, Daryl.
Oh my gosh, Bob, thank you so much. And to that point, you will hear not a single pitch today on anything related to VanillaSoft. If you do have questions, you know where the website is. And you should get an ice cream and eat that while you're looking at the website. But in the meantime, joining Bob on behalf of VanillaSoft, our resident in-house expert, she has gotten so many awards, folks, for her expertise. It's scary. She is a true Phonathon expert, benefiting from a long and varied career in telefundraising. Of course, I'm talking about Rachel Spencer. Over the last decade, she has graduated from student caller to professional telefundraiser to Phonathon manager and now Phonathon consultant. In her current role at VanillaSoft, she works really closely with more than 50 universities around the world on a whole variety of telephone-based campaigns. In previous roles, though, beyond VanillaSoft, she has managed teams of 40 telephone fundraisers. She's worked with the likes of Oxfam and UNICEF and Cancer Research UK. And she, of course, if you know Rachel, this makes perfect sense. She has set telephone campaign records for the most funds raised for the best ROI. So it's my way of saying she's you, she's been you, she's a little Bob, is what it sounds like she's becoming. So, Rachel, welcome to the show.
Like that.
I'm super excited for this webinar. I'm so happy to be on it, and so excited to have Bob here with us. It's a huge, huge honor.
Okay, now I got to ask, you two actually go back a fair way. So what's the story between you two? I got to ask.
Well,
you want to tell it or I'll tell it?
I'll start off, Bob, and you put me right if I go wrong. But Bob and I met about 4 years ago at the Case Spring Institute at Loughborough University here in the UK. And I was a hugely proud member of Team Bob throughout that conference. So he's been a long-standing mentor of mine. And Daryl, when you first asked, could I think of anybody I'd like to do a webinar with, Bob was, of course, the first person that came to mind.
I think Bob was the only person that came to mind. It was like Bob, and that was it. You know, that's what I think it was. So, Bob, did she miss anything? She was Team Bob. We got that out of her.
Well, just to maybe give a little bit of a plug, the Case, as you mentioned, keeps me quite busy with books and speaking. And one of my favorite things is an annual conference that's over in Loughborough in the UK. Many Americans wouldn't be able to find Loughborough on a map, but it has a great university. It's also the headquarters for the British Olympic team. So I would imagine they're getting quite busy these days. And we have a week-long conference every year, and the faculty divides people up into tutorial groups. So that's where Rachel had the misfortune of spending time with me. And I'll be heading back over there, I think, the week of April 27th for the 15th time. So it's really been an honor, and it's been fun, and you get to meet silly people like Rachel. So it's a pleasure.
Oh, well, Bob, you must mean something to her, because I know for a fact she cleaned up her flat where she's at right now. It looks very spotless.
I can see, yeah.
And so it's all good. All right. Let's get this show on the road. What are we going to cover today, folks? Well, that's a great question. We're actually going to back it up a little bit. We talk about resolutions, but we're going to, because we have a wide variety of people on this call, from lots of experience to just starting their Phonathon careers, if you will. So we're going to give a bit of a brief history of the Phonathon. We're going to talk about the dynamics between the U.S. or American versus the U.K. And there are dynamics there, and they matter. Then we're going to hit a little bit on some of the trends taking place today. We're going to give you some quick wins for your Phonathon calling, and then we're going to advocate some Phonathon resolutions. So, of course, along the way, any questions or comments, put them in the chat window. If you miss any of this, again, just a reminder, we'll send it to you. You can watch it back, so not to feel bad about that. All right, let's go into a brief Phonathon history lesson. Bob, I'm not going to judge you, but I'm going to assume that you're a bit older than Rachel.
Thanks a lot, Daryl.
Yeah, sorry, man.
How accurate that may be.
Well, I can say that, right? So I'm going to throw it to you. Why don't you start with the history?
I can't avoid the chronology here, because I think I go back to the origins of the Phonathon, if I may say so. I'm a proud graduate of Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. And anybody listening in who has a Student Alumni Association, I am the product of the Student Alumni Association at Miami University. And back in 1985 or so, they asked us to voluntarily call alumni and ask for gifts. You know, it wasn't as organized as having a dedicated space or a paid student calling team. And that was sort of the origins of what we went on to do in a big way over the next decade. I'd like to think that because of me, they decided paying the best callers was a good idea, which eliminated people like me from the program. So that was my genesis with calling. Then I took a job at Cleveland State University, and worked for a vice president who was an early adopter to the idea that you could computerize a calling program with paid students. And at the time, I think the Ohio State was one. The University of Washington was another automated one. And little Cleveland State, who was punching way above its weight, was about the third or fourth automated calling program. So I saw what I think was sort of the origins. Iowa came along pretty soon after that too. And the part I want to say about the history of this is that back in the day, when you knew everybody was going to answer the phone, and you had big volumes of records that you could almost call endlessly to people, it was a very quick process. Basically, thanks for answering the phone. Would you like to make a gift? No thanks, goodbye. Hi, would you like to make a gift? No thanks, goodbye. What we lacked in quality, we made up for in quantity, right? And that became a little bit of the American model. And along with that, I think the negotiation structure too. Ask way up here, and if they say no to that, bump it down a little bit, and then bump it down a little bit. And what we couldn't get a good window on was what kind of damage might we be doing. It was sort of scorch and burn fundraising, and we didn't know what sort of bad taste I think we were putting in people's mouths, and we didn't have to worry about it because the people who did answer the phone and did make a gift were giving an awful lot. So that was sort of my origins. Things got interesting in the late 90s when I started going to the UK and saw how they were kind of adjusting this American model. And with that, I'll throw it over to Rachel. You can fill in sort of the rest of the story, and then we can talk about the distinctions between our two countries.
Well, indeed. I have been doing Phonathon for about a decade now, so not quite the length of career that Bob has in Phonathon, but nonetheless, I've seen a few Phonathons in my time. I started off as a fundraiser myself at Queen Mary University here in London, and I'm proud to say that certainly at that time I was their highest ever fundraiser. I haven't gone back to check if that's still the case, but I'm happy to believe that it is. I
Not
then
me.
managed, that's it. I then managed a Phonathon program at King's College in London for about 3 years and learned a huge amount doing that. Of course, I used VanillaSoft whilst I was there, and now I have the great privilege of working with about 80 different universities on their Phonathons. So certainly we'll try and tease out some of that experience as we go through today.
Well, that's probably a good segue.
So, Rachel,
why don't we go into the U.S.
Go
UK?
ahead,
no, I was going to say you set it up, Bob. Let's talk about the American British dynamic.
So, as you know, I already said I get across the pond always at least once a year, and can remember back in the late 90s when phonathons were new in the UK, and annual giving was new, except they started calling it regular giving because they had a very good knack at getting donors who would be recurring, ongoing contributors. And the doorway for a lot of that was the Phonathon. I mentioned a little bit of my summary of the American kind of model. I think the Brits from the get-go were more interested in an extended conversation, were maybe a little more interested in preserving the relationship with their prospects. There was a little bit of a distinction in the ask structure that I saw. Rachel, you can tell me if all of this is true or not. I think the Brits were more interested in confirming that a donor wanted to make a gift, and then had the discussion about what would feel right. Is it a recurring gift? Is it a gift of a certain amount of pounds? But a little bit different from the sort of hierarchy ladder that you saw in the States. Then that also made possible recurring donors. And in my observation, still to this day, the Brits are running circles around my American Phonathon friends in acquiring recurring donors. And it's that Phonathon conversation that really is the stimulus for that. I still see a lot of American institutions that can offer recurring giving, but really struggle with the marketing of the idea and the discussion of the idea. And to me, it seems like the Brits and their Phonathon were the gateway to a lot of that. Any disagree with any of that?
No, I mean, very interestingly, as you say, the recurring gift is pretty much the norm in the UK. You know, the first ask is always, more or less, can you help us with a monthly gift of X? Whereas that still seems to be a bit of a novelty in the US in terms of asking people to make that regular ongoing commitment to the university, which of course is potentially leaving a lot of gifts and donations on the table. But also, I think it's perhaps part and parcel of what we were talking about earlier, which is call duration and the phone calls that, as far as I can see, are taking place in the UK are generally much longer. There's much more of a relationship building, rapport building angle. There's a lot more, at times, value being offered to the alum, a very detailed case for support being offered before ultimately we ask for that much longer term commitment to supporting the university versus a much shorter call teeing up to perhaps a much smaller commitment in terms of a one-off gift. So some quite interesting observations there.
Now, what about things?
And a lot of that assumes.
I'm just going to. I'm sorry. Jump in, Bob. Let me throw it out here. What about things like the population sizes are different, right? That's the big thing. And what about things about how you ask for the gift amount? You know, the ask ladder. I'll throw that out there.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Rich.
Well, I would say certainly there seems to be a lot more in the way of negotiation on the UK side, and it's sort of about finding the right gift for that particular alum. And if that is a larger one-off gift, then so be it. If that's a smaller regular gift over many months and years, then so be it. And there's a lot more back and forward, I think, between the student and the alum in question in order to find what is the best gift for you, and also, of course, the best gift for us as the university. But indeed, to Daryl's point, I think the UK universities in general have a slightly smaller data set to work with, and so perhaps they can afford to spend a little bit more time on these calls versus a slightly more quantity approach in the US. But I'd love to know what you think of that, Bob.
Well, all of those flowers are a little more precious, aren't they? And I'm sort of teasing my American friends for what was the model 10 or 15 years ago. I think in part because of the experience across the pond and our own observations about declining contact rates and people not even willing to engage us in any conversation. I think we've sharpened our game and gotten smarter and appreciated that we don't have a finite audience either. It might be a bigger audience in some cases, but we can use this opportunity for good, or we can use it to harm the relationship, right? Which I think might get us into some discussion about trends. Daryl, any way you want to frame that, Jet?
It does. Well, a couple of things. We're already getting lots of questions coming in. So your recurring gifts concept has sparked multiple questions. So, folks, we're going to save those to the end as a teaser. We actually have a dedicated slide where we hit all your questions up, but keep those coming in. There was a question about call duration, though. Do you see a difference in call duration between the UK and the US? I think I hit you up and I heard you said the US was a shorter call duration.
Well, it was historically, but again, that was based on some assumptions that you could reach everybody. There was no caller ID when I started. And so you could almost teach best practice that let's keep this shorter so we can move on to the next conversation. And like I said, we didn't fully appreciate what sort of flowers we might have been trampling in that process. I think the appreciation that a good conversation, whether or not it results in a gift, is probably better for the long-term institutional relationship with that prospect, is what I see. And I'm going to guess Rachel will say the same thing.
Absolutely. When I was training my callers, I tended to say to them, if you have somebody on the phone that wants to chat, basically stay on the phone as long as they want to stay on the phone to you. If that's 40 minutes, if that's an hour, if they are loving this human interaction with the university, then take that and run with it, because it might be, of course, the only human interaction that alum has with the university over the course of a year. So if they're loving it, then run with it.
So it's funny.
Advice.
So we've got Haley here asking the question, how long would you say your calls are? And we've got Jared saying, do you actually find that people are wanting to have long conversations like that on a cold call?
I remember once as a fundraiser myself, I was speaking to a lovely elderly lady and we were on the phone for more than an hour. And actually I was very sad and she was sad when the call had to ultimately come on the end because the shift was over. It was 9:30 p.m. at night and I was going, I'm sorry, I have to go home now. But certainly, yes. And not everybody, right? So there'll be many alum that'll be trying to rush you off the phone. It's not their thing. You've imposed on their evening. They weren't asking for this. But if you have somebody that's loving it, run with it.
All right.
It'd be great if that lady walked into the shot behind you right now, Rachel, and I'd like to introduce you to...
Oh my God.
Here she is.
We now live together. We have great conversations every night.
All right.
I think there's data that says longer calls lead to gifts. I think part of that is probably a little self-fulfilling, right? That the people who enjoyed speaking to us anyway are probably not going to be a spoil sport and not make a gift. But just intuitively, with that longer-term perspective, I think that institutional relationship is an important thing to preserve.
Why
We
don't we?
saw
So go ahead, Rachel.
Sorry, I was going to say, sorry,
No,
we've got so much to say.
I know.
But I was going to say, we did a study recently that said for each minute you can keep somebody on the phone, your chance of getting a gift increases threefold. So for each minute you can keep them on, your chances of getting a gift are skyrocketing. So something to think about.
There you go. All right, Bob, you brought up the idea of trends, and I do want to hit up on trends. Why don't we set the stage a little bit? I want to talk about some of the emerging trends, but before we get to that, why don't we talk about some of the challenges that are facing the Phonathon, which will then lead or set the stage for those emerging trends?
Yeah, Rachel, do you want to summarize that list that you have that I think laments all of our frustrations these days?
I know. I think it's a list that we've all heard before. We're all fairly intimately connected, I think, with some of the challenges that are going on in this space at the moment. I mean, contact rates, I think, is the subject of the moment in terms of those certainly going down. It's harder than ever to get people on the phone. We're trying to fight through more noise than ever to get people to pick up. Engagement is kind of down. Affinity towards phone is down. Participation in some cases is down. So it's a pretty doom and gloom picture. Alongside this, costs of Phonathon are increasing. ROI is a challenge because of that. So it's certainly a tricky time to be doing Phonathon, but all is not lost in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and I agree with all that. And I also think that while there's a right sizing going on of the Phonathon, I still think there's smart uses to weave it in to all the channels that make up the fundraising program. And I'm still pleasantly surprised at the places I get to where the Phonathon is still a very important revenue source and donor source for the fundraising that they do. If I can just run with that a little bit, I do see some uses that wouldn't have been in existence back when I started as a boy in the Phonathon, but increasingly start to show up now. I start to see the phone room being thought of as the engagement room and student callers as the student engagement team. I start to see places where they're taking the high-end annual giving crowd and they're taking their best callers and pairing them with an audience that ought to be asked for a bigger gift. And in some cases are sending out a printed proposal in advance with an invitation to discuss this at a scheduled time with a Phonathon caller. I see a lot of super segmentation these days. Artificial intelligence is becoming a thing in our work. And when I look at what's behind the curtain in artificial intelligence, I just see very efficient segmentation, often driven by affinity scoring, that lets us divide people sometimes in real time because of an event they just attended or an email newsletter that they just opened a week ago or a survey that they just completed. I can see a lot faster who's got a pulse and what do I do about it. So I think that has implications for what products we're using to do calling and what decisions we make about those audiences. Anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I think it's just the great thing is that actually, yes, this is a challenging time. It's not easy to be doing Phonathon right now, but that's driving a huge amount of creativity and innovation in terms of new approaches to calling, new uses of the phone, and people really rethinking how do we do this? How can we do it better? And how can we best leverage this medium, which, as I said earlier, may be the only human-to-human touch point we have with these alumni on an annual basis. And certainly some of our customers have had their most successful Phonathons ever in this very challenging climate. So that there's a lot to be considered in terms of how we might go up against these challenges.
I know we're going to talk in a bit about things you can do to improve your Phonathon tonight, but on that subject of student engagement staff, I made just a quick list of things I see Phonathon callers doing these days that you wouldn't have seen once upon a time. So doing regional calling in advance of upcoming alumni events, doing surveys of event attendees that might have just happened, sending birthday messages out to graduates, coding student activities from when graduates were students on campus. So we keep looking for this mythical connection between what kind of things were they involved with as students, and does that make them more likely to give, or are those the kind of things we should be discussing with them? I see calling teams going back into old yearbooks in some cases and researching some of that data. I see student calling teams scheduling appointments for leadership annual giving staff. LinkedIn is very interesting. LinkedIn wants to be your best friend at a college and university. So they'll tell you which companies employ the most of your grads, and they'll even tell you which grads they are that work at those companies. So I see student calling teams researching some of that information. All these years where we've kind of watch the kids doodling while they're waiting to get somebody to actually pick up the phone. I'm just starting to see some smart uses of that time. And not to hog the conversation, anything you want to add to that?
I'll jump in.
Absolutely, as I say. Go ahead, Daryl, over to you.
No, I love what you guys are saying, because so you've heard you talk about the emerging aspects of how we're kind of evolving from a high volume calling to a much more segmented, maybe more defined niche audience. I've heard you talk about it's a much more personalized approach, and that includes things like scripting, email, branding. It includes multi-channel, phone, email, text, video, however they want to engage. That's how we're going to engage. But I'm also seeing things on a couple different areas. I'm seeing emerging an engagement center approach where you're using Phonathons for more than just fundraising, alumni engagement around events or reunions or sporting events. And I'm also seeing an increasing in-house approach. So maybe you can talk to me about those two observations.
Well, yeah, there's another phrase that didn't exist when I was a boy, the idea of a digital engagement officer. That in your work might be called an inside salesperson, right? That reaches out to people through the mail or tries to schedule a video chat, or like I said, is calling a higher caliber of gift prospect. That if you look at the giving pyramid, I like to say there's sometimes that muddle in the middle that's above sort of the regular direct marketing that we do, but is slightly below the face-to-face major gift solicitation we do. So how an institution fills that niche, I think, is a never-ending riddle. And I'm seeing some places that are organizing those activities in sort of a digital online video calling, direct mail, texting kind of a way that to me just seems to be a smart way to fill that space in a way that we've wrestled with for a long time.
Okay. I'm going to move us along, and I tell you why I'm moving us along. A couple reasons. One, we're way behind. That's okay. Two, we're getting amazing questions. We got Crystal and Kelly and Caleb and Anastasia. And these questions, guys, are going to blow your socks off if you're not following. So, guys, keep asking the questions. But that means I got to make sure we have time at the end to answer their questions. So, we talked about... I know, exactly. First time caller. You got it. We talked about some quick wins. Bob, maybe you can start with you. Can you give us some help for today's Phonathon calling?
Well, I can, but I'm going to defer to my friend who is really on the front lines of calling these days. So, Rachel, you chime in, and if there's any other things I have to add, I'll add them after I give you a chance to talk, if that's okay.
I think segmentation is a big theme at the moment in terms of being much more targeted and strategic in terms of who we're actually calling. I think with contact rates going down and costs going up, we need to be making sure that we are focusing our efforts proportionately on people that are A, most likely to pick up the phone, and B, most likely to give if they do pick up the phone. And so I think really targeted and thoughtful segmentation and the creation of much more niche, calling pools based on prior engagement or prior giving is becoming much more important, focusing on people that seem to have more of an affinity towards phone, for example, or more of an affinity towards the university in general. So maybe they've attended events, they've volunteered, they've been involved in other activities that the alumni team are putting on. So just being more thoughtful, I think, in terms of who you're calling can be a quick win. I would then always talk about personalizing your approach as far as possible. If you're going to have a slightly more sophisticated segmentation strategy, it's definitely worth thinking about how do I make this call as personal and tailored as possible to the individual in question, and making the call feel very much about them, the individual, as opposed to about us, the university. And lastly, I would tend to push people to really invest in your callers. At the end of the day, it's your fundraising team that are at the front line of all of this. And I think, in my opinion, often actually the recruitment process is slightly neglected in terms of really making sure that you have the best available callers on your team, and then a real focus on not just the initial training, but the ongoing development and training of your callers so that they can do absolutely what you've employed them to do to the best of their ability. So I would say those would be my quickest wins, folks.
And the only thing I would add to that is, there's some very elegant solutions out there, and there's places I visit where they've really streamlined the prospect rating and prospect identification process. I think the rest of the institutions out there, which is the most of the institutions out there, is sort of cobbling together these things the best way they can. And I just say these days we have a lot of data inputs, whether it's who opens the email newsletter or who picks up the phone or who just came to an event. Any way that you can tie all that data together in a way that lets you have a window on who's got a pulse and who's raising their hand and who seems like they're happy to be engaged, I think is only going to add to the efficiency of the return on investment that we spend on calling.
So we talked, obviously we prepped for today's conversation. Some of the things we talked about when obviously, but I want to make sure we hit them up because there was some great, the best stuff happens in the prep calls. One of the things we talked about, Rachel, was you mentioned improving contact rates. And one of the things we talked about was prioritizing based on most likely to pick up the phone and give. And you also talked about how it's more than just a phone now. Email, video, even direct mail, for example, that's some definite quick wins to increase success. Anything you want to add to on that?
Yeah, I think multi-channel is another buzzword, or omni-channel is something that's being talked about a lot, particularly in the US, but also in the UK at the recent case conference in Sheffield. The ability to use not just phone as part of your Phonathon, to think about email, fairly obviously, as a way of potentially encouraging people to pick up the next time you call them, but also text messaging, and more recently video. So a few of our customers in the new year are going to be trialing the inclusion of live video recordings of their callers on pledge emails, for example, but also in terms of saying, I've tried to call you a few times now, sorry we've missed you. This is the human face that is trying to get you on the phone, and hopefully trying to break through some of the noise, I guess, that our alumni are experiencing, and encourage our alum to pick up the phone, of course.
And Daryl, just to tie a couple of thoughts together with that, again, under sort of the trend umbrella, I see the collision of a couple things here. You brought up texting, which I forgot to. I think you're going to see texting become a standard element of a lot of calling rooms and student callers, either as a pre-call message, and we can have a long chat about the strategy of pre-call communications, but also as a thank you, as a pledge fulfillment strategy, perhaps. And then the video piece, I can't understate enough. We've just gotten 5G wireless in Chicago, and so I'm told I can download The Sound of Music in 3 seconds with that kind of speed. So at what point does that become sort of standard operating procedure, that we're almost as present in a video way as we are in an audio way or a paper way with our audiences? So I think the speed of technology, along with texting and video, I wouldn't be surprised if those all become standard elements of a calling room before too long.
Let me throw something out here. So I know, Bob, you specifically mentioned the idea of improving the ROI. I know Rachel's hit on that too. So on these quick wins conversation, there's two ways we can improve our ROI, right? We can generate more givings, or we can reduce our spend. So are there some quick wins to reduce spend? Let me throw one out there as for discussion, the idea of a do-it-yourself in-house as opposed to partnering somebody. Or are there other ways to improve the ROI?
So I think again, when I started, this was a lot of high volume calling, and you began every year assuming we're going to try and call everybody, which at some institutions could be 500,000 people back in the day. And so nowadays, I almost wonder if we're starting to think about the Phonathon in a box that doesn't go all year, certainly, and in some cases may go for a sprint rather than a marathon. And that's where, this isn't an infomercial, but I think products like VanillaSoft offer somebody the opportunity to think about the Phonathon in a more compartmentalized way, because we've gotten smarter at not dialing to death those audiences that are not very likely to pick up the phone, and to leverage the time that we have available to call the people that are going to speak with us, and to also think about what other uses of a student calling team can I think about. Did I answer your question?
You did. All right. I'm going to segue because I want to make sure we have lots of time for questions because I'm getting overwhelmed here. We're getting questions on voicemail. We're getting more questions on texting. This is brilliant, guys. Together. I know. What can I say? The audience is engaged. So let's get to our next slide number thon, which is all about Phonathon resolutions for 2020. The very reason, folks, that you came here today was about Phonathon resolutions. I'm sure this is going to be a long conversation. I'm going to push to make it slightly less long so we get to the Q&A. But let's flip it over. Rachel, I'm going to start with you this time. I've already been throwing over this to Bob. Rachel, what are some of your 2020 Phonathon resolutions?
Gosh, well, I think we've talked quite a bit about contact rates in terms of multi-channel being a really interesting idea. And then, of course, focusing our calling efforts on people that seem to want to hear from us. Either they've positively opted into phone or they've been engaged with other avenues. Maybe they gave last year, whatever it might be. Just being thoughtful in terms of who we're actually trying to get hold of. Always, as I say, personalize your outreach as much as you can. And certainly, I would encourage scripts and email content to be reviewed periodically throughout the year. I think if they're feeling familiar and perhaps tired to you, it's actually going to be the case that the alum is also on the phone going to hear a script that sounds quite familiar. So not to rest on the laurels of old Phonathon content and to keep reinvigorating that campaign on campaign. And then I'd also recommend diversifying your approach. So some of our customers have had huge success this year in terms of taking a deeper dive into their database and finding segments that perhaps historically they haven't been calling, maybe international alum, maybe staff, all sorts of constituencies that historically haven't been involved in Phonathon and may actually be waiting hungrily for your call. So those would be some of my ideas in terms of quick wins, I guess, for 2020.
What about you, Bob?
One thing I would add to that, and this might be stating the obvious a little bit, but the quality of phone numbers you go into calling with is going to impact success on the back end. And I see a lot of places that just aren't very attentive about what are we doing sort of systematically to clean phone numbers. So whether or not you do a reunion program at your institution, I think the anniversary year of somebody's graduation, every 5 years or so, is a great excuse to send them a survey and just ask them to update their details and update their contact information. You can learn a lot just by who takes the time to update their contact information. And by the way, you get good contact information to begin with. These days, there are phone research companies that will tell you what's a mobile number and what's a landline phone number. I think that's useful if we want to get into texting or some of these other elements we're talking about in the Student Engagement Center that can help add value to our return on investment. But a lot of it is garbage in, garbage out, right? So if we don't have good contact information, we're literally throwing money away by not even being able to reach some of the people that we're talking about.
All right. So let me see if I can recap. If I got it right. So you said a whole bunch of stuff. So our resolutions for 2020 when it comes to the Phonathon: contact rates, number one. All right. We want to work towards improving the quality of our data. You heard Bob talk about that. Like, surveys are a wonderful thing to do that. The other thing you can do there, of course, stagger your call attempts and make sure you're prioritizing your call attempts based on engagement. So contact rates, number one. Number two, engagement, right? So you want to jazz up your scripts, rewrite your emails, be a little more thoughtful. So you want more engagement. They've talked about that. They've talked about participation, right? They've talked about how you can focus on recruiting, developing, retaining the best possible callers. Your results will only be as good as your callers. So contact rates, engagement, participation, 3. Fourth, diversify your approach. So figure out different segments or different channels that work for you. If you haven't done it, make it your resolution to do it. So that's contact rates, engagement, participation, and diversify your approach. Look at your ROI, number 5, right? How can you either increase your givings or reduce your costs? So those are 5 resolutions that these two fine experts have said. But Bob, I'm going to throw you a hook. Should we do any of this at all? Is the Phonathon dead?
The curse and the blessing for annual giving folks is that we've got very quantifiable metrics, right? So if we get to a point where nobody's picking up the phone and nobody's making a gift, the numbers are going to tell us that. But I don't think we've arrived at that point yet. And in fact, I think we had some responsibility to get smarter at how we were running a Phonathon. Stanford made headlines a couple years ago by saying they were getting out of the Phonathon business, but they always left the door open to get back into that business. I think they were nervous about how many secret Google millionaires they were offending doing dialing after dialing after dialing. But we ought to be drawn to any channel that's effective at getting our story told and inspiring people to raise their hand. So I'm sort of happy having this conversation because I don't want to talk about the year the Phonathon ended. We're not there yet. That's my opinion.
Rachel,
Okay,
what's your opinion? Is the Phonathon dead?
It is not. It is alive and kicking. We just need to, as I say, be creative and innovate. Look at that. We just need to be creative and innovative in terms of how we're doing Phonathon. At the end of the day, there is no better medium by which to acquire new donors. There's no better medium by which to upgrade new donors. And importantly, there's no better medium to really engage your alum and have a really lovely human-to-human interaction. And that, I think, is why phone will never die, because of its human nature. But that further allows you, I think, to really leverage that human aspect of phone and therefore put the Phonathon to greater work in terms of doing all the things that we've talked about beyond just fundraising. So if I were making one piece of advice in terms of the future of phone, it would be to think about how can we make Phonathon indispensable to the university, even if we didn't raise a penny. So that's my goal for you all for this year.
All right. So let me recap by saying the phone is not dead, but it's different. In other words, how you used to do it, might be dead. Hyper-focused now, not a broad shotgun like Bob said when he began in our history lesson of the Phonathon, right? It's very different. Everything's different, but it's not dead. Again, to recap those resolutions: contact rates, engagement, participation, diversity, and ROI. I got it so right. It says so right here, folks, on my notes. So there you go. All right. We're going to move on. I am so excited, you two. We got through those slides, and we have 15 minutes for Q&A, and the questions keep coming in. So, folks, I'm actually scared we won't be able to get through all of your questions. That's how many are coming in. We'll do our best. So here we go. If you have a question, just type it into the chat window. If you don't want to do that, use Twitter at VanillaSoft. We're monitoring that too. So that's your questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the next slide, and we're going to come back to this slide periodically. On this next slide, where we have all of our presenters. You have Bob and Rachel, and you have their email addresses. So if you haven't followed them on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., there's their email address. So if you're watching this on demand, I'm putting it up now, bob@bobbrudensky.com, rachel.spencer@vanillasoft.com. And of course, you can always email me too, but really, they're the smart ones. That's how you get a hold of them. Okay, so we'll bring that back. So if you don't have your pen ready, get it out. If you do have your pen, you have written this down and you followed them, and those are the experts. There you go. Let's go into the questions. And I'm just going through them in the order they came in out of fairness. And if I miss one, folks, I apologize. Rachel mentioned that they try to find a particular amount each alumni could give. What would be the way of determining that amount for each alumni in order to make a call more personable?
Oh my goodness. Well, there are all sorts of ways in order to determine ask amounts. Obviously with your donors, you want to look at what they've given in the past and ask for a reasonable increment above what they gave last year as an easy starting point. For your non-donors, it's a bit trickier. You might want to look at average gift on previous campaigns and use that as a starting point. Or if you have a data team that are ready to be put to work, I've seen some universities do what's called a propensity giving analysis, wherein various alum are considered in terms of their career path and what they're doing with their life, and do they own a home and all sorts of things, and they are scored in line with their propensity to make a gift of a certain level, and you would therefore solicit a gift in line with that. So a lot of different options, but you just want to make sure you're not selling yourself short. In a way, you're better to ask for more and get less than to ask for a smaller amount and actually you could have got more.
And Bob, jump in whenever you want to. I'm throwing these questions out. All right, next question we have. So this question was, does VanillaSoft have clients? But Bob, I'm going to open this up to you too because of your exposure to the whole community. Do you have clients who only call donors who have shown interest in speaking on the phone in the past, or more specifically, have given the phonathons in the past? So do you only call those people is the question.
Well, so I'll take this one. And just to not put too much of a fine point on it, you said, do we call donors who want to be called through the phone? My opinion is call people who've answered the phone before. And I see a lot of places that don't do a good job of tracking that. They'll track how many pledges came through the phonathon, but they don't really differentiate what happened to the rest of the people that we tried to reach. There are people on the database who've never picked up the phone ever when we've tried to call them, and you may make them a secondary audience. But I would lump in, Rachel, tell me if I'm right, I would lump in the phone-friendly audience along with the people who've given over the phone. Daryl, to your question, and that's an interesting distinction, which sort of gets to keeping people in their own lane and their own channel, right? That do you keep the direct mail audience, and the phone audience, the phone audience? I think you can make this as schizophrenic as you want by doing a kickoff mailing to everybody and then call the folks who haven't responded to the mailing, or vice versa, the sorry we missed you letter. So again, I'm willing to follow the data. And I think if you're calling the right way, like we've been talking about, I don't think we need to be apologetic about trying to reach people over the phone.
Mm-hmm. And certainly I would say we do have some customers that are only calling people that have positively opted into phone or that have seemed to demonstrate an affinity towards phone in the past. For those that aren't, we would certainly be encouraging them to focus as a priority their efforts on those people that have a telephone affinity, that have given in the past, etc., just so that you're proportionately investing your time and your money and your efforts in those that are most likely to pick up the phone and give and enjoy the call. But then that's where multi-channel comes in, as I say, to perhaps get other people
Bob
online.
This might be a good place to jump in and talk about the whole data privacy issue. One of the New Year's resolutions in California is that they enacted the new California data privacy law, which in many ways patterns the GDPR legislation that Rachel's familiar with over in the UK. It's an interesting discussion with educational institutions and their alumni, because we can presume an existing relationship with our audiences in most cases. But that doesn't carry if somebody is just annoyed with the fact that we're dialing and dialing and dialing. the impact of the GDPR legislation in the UK, and we'll see how this plays out in the US, with most universities has been that they need to give people plenty of opportunities to opt out. And they have to be very transparent with what data they're retaining about people and how they're using it institutionally. I've started to see some places in the States that are coming up with the idea of requiring everybody to opt in to fundraising. And that's had some disastrous results in the UK, where they lose a good chunk of their donor base just by requiring them to want to hear our appeals. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the States. But it goes to the point about, should we assume that people are happy to receive a call or not? And I think that's a very delicate discussion. But if we believe everything else that Rachel has said in this chat about the warm and fuzzy extended conversation and preserving the institutional relationship with our audiences, then I don't think that I hide that. I think I try to demonstrate it in the conversations I have with people.
All right. Next question. Do you have data to support the use of texting in fundraising? So I'm guessing they're not sure they should do texting. So what do we know from a data point of view, a results point of view, or even anecdotal, as long as you qualify it as anecdotal, when it comes to texting and fundraising? Bob, you got your hand up. You get it first.
Let me just jump in and say, how you use texting is an important part of that question. That I don't think texting is succeeding where it's just spam, broadcast messaging to your entire database. Where I see texting succeeding is where the Phonathon caller is sending a one-to-one message thanking somebody for speaking to them, or a parent volunteer is texting another parent inviting them to make a gift. So my opinion is that you can use texting for ill or for good. And what I see working these days is the kind of texting that's a one-to-one communication, as opposed to just being another way to sort of spam people. Rachel, anything you want to add to that?
No, absolutely right. I mean, I think when we're thinking about multi-channel, it's important to say that it is a multi-channel approach to Phonathon. So it's not send out a mass email, send out a mass text message, then call everyone. It's how do we best leverage the combination of these mediums in order to hopefully get somebody on the phone. So you might call them one day and text them the next day, and then you call them and then you email them, with a view to kind of getting these people ultimately engaged by whatever means seems to be most engaging to them. In perhaps the way the salesperson or a professional fundraiser might.
Okay, moving on. You had mentioned, Bob, about pairing your top callers with your higher level annual givers. So they're wanting to know, do you mail out invitations ahead of time? How does that work?
Well, and I think the real relevant question at the moment is that an adult who is your digital engagement officer? Can you take your best callers and make them digital engagement officers? Can it be a combination of both? But in general, just to go back to my analogy of the muddle in the middle on the pyramid, do you send out something that looks above and beyond the appeal letter, something that is more proposal-esque, is an invitation to join the president's circle or the vice chancellor's circle, and that invites a conversation or is followed up with a conversation with either a student who's going to be comfortable asking for a larger gift, and that's not always the case. So be careful who you put in that role. I think some students are sincerely astonished at how much people will give if you ask them to make it that large. And then, I think it tends to follow the rhythm of our other communications, but it's just elevated in appreciation that if we're talking to the right person, we should be raising our sights, and they're probably, familiar with the sort of ask range that we're envisioning. Anything from the UK side of the house?
Yeah, I mean, all I would say is just, of course, these are higher level donors. They need to be approached with caution and with care and thoughtfully. And absolutely, it needs to be the right caller for the job. They need to be taken down their own little call journey that will recognize them and the value that they represent to the university. But equally, they're not to be afraid of. These are alum at the end of the day. And I genuinely believe that could be a really lovely interaction for that mid-level or even higher level donor donor, provided they do have that level of affinity towards the university and the call is done right. It should be a lovely interaction for both parties.
And Daryl, if I can just add on to that, I think we have more access to more information these days. We've got LinkedIn, we've got wealth screening, we're paying more attention to affinity indicators, and I think that's identifying a bigger bunch of these sort of mid-level names that we don't often have gift officers who are going to go visit face-to-face.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the calling room becomes a very relevant asset to just how you engage these bigger numbers of prospects. And so it's real interesting to watch that at the moment. I see a lot of people jumping into that space with different ideas, which are all good.
All right, next question. They want to know if you guys have any recommendations on the right cadence, email, phone, etc.
Rachel.
Well, I mean, again, it's the kind of multi-channel idea, isn't it? So that there's no right or wrong. Ideally, we're going to try and work out for an individual alum what is the best way for them. You know, there's no one size fits all, but certainly worth thinking about how persistent we want to be and which means are most likely to engage certain segments that we might be calling into. So again, no one size fits all. It may be that for your younger alum, for example, that you have a slightly more text heavy cadence that you're going to implement. For slightly older alum, maybe you're going for a more telephone driven approach. But then, you know, once they've not picked up a few times, income email, income text. So it's really about having a variety, I think, and actually allowing your callers to experiment with those various channels in order to hopefully engage everybody in the means that's most engaging for them.
I think the secret ingredient that's missing at a lot of places is just the ability to see all that data and make some smart decisions about what lane somebody prefers or what channel as opposed to something else. But you know, I still get to places where it's a little bit of a victory to post something on social media or get the email sent out. And so to try and get too elegant with, you know, understanding who the online donors are versus who the direct mail donors are can get tricky because the ability to evaluate those decisions is still lagging at a lot of places.
Okay, I'm running tight on time here, folks. So quick and dirty question. I'm going to go rapid fire now. Voicemails, are they still effective? Yes or no?
rapid fire.
Yes. I would say yes in the UK. Yes in the US. Sorry, in the UK it's pretty controversial. It can even be deemed harassment. So take care with that, UK folks. I would not recommend leaving voicemails in the UK, but in the US certainly that seems to be effective. Yeah.
I'd say in the US, after a certain amount of dialings, which isn't too many, I think you're probably better off letting people know who you are and why you're calling, and give them a way to follow up.
Okay. What's the maximum number of times students should call before that person is abandoned?
I think it makes a difference whether they're a prior donor or a never donor. My opinion is we should quit earlier with non-donors, maybe 5 times. Rachel might say do more. But if somebody has demonstrated that they've given before, especially over the phone, then I think I would give them the benefit of the doubt and try a little bit harder because they've already put themselves in that bucket.
Yeah, and I would tend to say that in many ways, spacing of the call attempts is as important, if not more important than the number of attempts themselves. You know, you just don't want to be seen to be harassing somebody. But if you called them 12 times over 6 months, you know, I think that would be absolutely fine. 12 times in a week, probably overkill.
Do you think some schools should look at doing away with the Phonathon and looking more towards crowdfunding and text or video appeals to replace the Phonathon? No. Bob.
You know, I still respect the singular value of the Phonathon to acquire donors. I think giving days have begun to accomplish a lot of that at a lot of our institutions. And again, I'm happy to follow the data. So if I get to too many phone rooms that are not phonathons anymore, they're dial-a-thons, because we don't actually reach a lot of people. And so I don't think we want to beat that into the ground. But I also, at the moment, think that the annual giving office offers a menu of options, of which crowdfunding is one, of which a giving day is another. And I also think the channels are a menu as well, including the Phonathon. So, but this isn't my opinion over anybody else's. I think you follow the data. I think we're in the midst of right-sizing the Phonathon, and I think we should just continue to keep our eyes open and looking at the data that we can get our hands on.
Okay, we are out of time, folks. In fact, we are over time. So a couple of things we need to know. Let's bring up that last slide so we can get the email addresses for Bob and Rachel. There they are, folks. Write them down. Email them directly. They'd love to hear from you. That's the first thing. While you're writing that down, we're being asked, do you plan to host another call just like this one? And the answer is absolutely. And if I can get Bob to join us again, Bob says no. Then forget Bob, Rachel, and somebody else. We will do this again. We obviously did not get to all of your questions. We ran out of time, and that's with 15 minutes of questions. So love them, keep them coming. In the meantime, what you saw here today were our subjective, although well-informed resolutions on how your Phonathon can be more successful in the year 2020. On behalf of the entire crew here at VanillaSoft, Rachel, thank you so much. You were brilliant as always. I can see why you're so accomplished. Thank you. And Bob, thank you very much. You are a rock star. All right. So with that, if you want to know more about these two, by the way, that's a little tip. There's this thing called Google. Go there, Rachel Spencer or Bob Brudensky. Lots of information. Of course, lots of other resources out there. We ourselves are members of CASE. We support them a lot, all the time. So does Bob. So does Rachel. Lots of resources, folks. We're just one. And if you like this one, there's more content at VanillaSoft.com. In the meantime, we are beyond out of time. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We had a lot of fun. My name is Daryl Prale, and we shall talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.